As I mentioned before, today we are in Septuagesima Sunday, the second of the 3 Sundays preceding Ash Wednesday, the second Sunday of pre-Lent. Now, some of you may have noticed that in today's epistle, around chapter 12, verse 2, Paul says, whether this guy saw the heavens in the body or outside of the body. Some of you may come to the conclusion, hey, astral projection is in the Bible. Well, actually, yes, it is. Out-of-body experience definitely is. So, go ahead, tell your friends that, see if you can impress them. Though I will point out that what's in there is that it can happen at God's behest, not necessarily how to do it, but that out-of-body experience can happen. Okay, but that's not my reason for talking to you today. That's not my reason for reading these readings to you today. Okay, today we have a number of themes. 3 overlapping themes, actually. Within Catholicism, the theme is Christ the New Noah. Within Lutheranism, the theme is Word Alone Sunday. At least amongst those Lutheran churches that still use the 1-year lectionary in the old calendar, which, with the exception of the last Sunday after Epiphany and the readings for the second Sunday of Lent, is very similar to the traditional Catholic calendar for the Latin Mass. And the third theme is the theological virtue of hope, faith, hope, and charity, one of which applies to each of the 3 Sundays. Are these themes mutually exclusive? I don't think so, because I'm not an either-or person. I'm a both-and kind of person. And these themes, they're not exclusive. In fact, the theme that comes to us most is the theme of the Word. The farmer who sows his seed is basically God sowing the Word. God sowing the Word throughout the universe. And each seed represents a person and how this person reacts to the Word. But we get ahead of ourselves here. What is the Word? That's the first thing we look at. In the Greek of the New Testament, the word is logos. Now, there is another word in Greek, rhema. In the Septuagint, the words logos and rhema were used interchangeably to translate the Hebrew word davar. And it's interesting because there are certain fringe theologies which talk about the words logos and rhema as very separate. They're not. Actually, logos, according to Plato, logos is very similar to how we would use the word sentence. Logos is a complete thought or proposition, and it must have an onoma, or a noun, and a rhema, or a verb. So that word rhema is actually verb, whereas logos is a proposition. In Greek philosophy, come the 2nd century A.D., logos was the rational principle, the ordering principle of the universe. And we see this, as I mentioned in the Logos of Ophiel interview Friday night, Greek philosophy points to Christ just as much as Jewish law. Christ is seen as the culmination of both. And we find in the apologists, in the theologians in the early church who had a background in Greek philosophy, who converted from the educated classes, they start talking about Christ as logos, Christ as the rational ordering principle of the universe, Christ as the Word. So you see, we're pretty far beyond the concept of the Word as meaning just the Bible. And of course, my Bible's on the other bookshelf, so I can't hold one up and shake it in front of the camera. Go figure. See, it's not just the Word is the Bible, whereas a lot of people make that mistake. They simply say God's Word is simply the Bible, nothing less and nothing more. The Bible is an inspired document. The Bible is an important document. More to the point, it's a collection of 73 documents. However, it is still ultimately nothing more than words written on paper. Words written on paper. That's what the Bible is. The actual word that is present in the Bible is the Word of God. The Word of God, which either leads to Christ, leading us to Christ, or leads us from Christ in our actions and our faith. Yet the Word itself, as the Gospel of John says, in archi in o logos, in the beginning was the Word, in principio erat verbum. This is right at the end of every Latin Mass. It's called the last Gospel, John 1, 1-14. The Word is Christ. The Word is the second person of the Trinity. The Word is the masculine aspect of God the Son. The feminine aspect is Sophia, which I hope we get to talk about at some other point during the church year. So today we talk about the ordering principle of the universe. And as we have in the parable, the seeds are the individual people, and how they react to the Word. How do they react to the ordering principle of our lives? Now, I know some of you are wondering, why am I not talking about Jesus' suffering? Why am I not talking about the cross? Because there's plenty of time for that when we get to Lent, even more so on Passiontide. Today, I'm talking about a different aspect of God the Son. He has many aspects, and these aspects will all be discussed in their due time. So for those of you whose entire conception of Jesus begins and ends at Good Friday, there are 364 other days in the year, too. Now, as Jesus says, the seed is the Word of God. Those by the road are those who hear. See, so I'm kind of giving an alternate interpretation. The seed is the person's reaction to the Word of God, because the seeds who fell by the road are the people who hear. He says that in the next sentence. And when the devil comes, takes away the Word from their heart. In other words, the devil takes away the Word from their heart, meaning that before these seeds can plant root in the heart, before your heart and accordingly your life can be ordered by divine principles, the adversary comes and prevents the seed, takes the seed out of the soil that is your heart. And therefore, the ordering of life by divine principle doesn't happen, because it was preempted by an enemy. Can this happen? Can an enemy preempt this? Yes. Not because the enemy is stronger than God, but because God allows the expression of your free will. Do you choose to live an ordered life, or do you choose to live a chaotic life? If you choose the chaotic life, then that seed is snatched out. So in some sense, we're actually talking meta-narrative here in terms of the devil as actual being with the horns and the pitchfork, which is really more of a medieval perception anyway, or the perception of devil as metaphor. I'm not really sure those are mutually exclusive. I mean, the church teaches that there is a literal devil. As long as you're not breaking away from that, you can still call yourself a good Catholic. But you can say the devil is a metaphor in certain occasions. I haven't thought that out too deeply yet, so please don't ask me for details. I'll get back to you on that one. But we also have the seed that falls on the rock. Okay, these are people. I'm using the seed to represent each individual person as well as the Word, the interaction of person and Word. The seed can't take root in the rock. So the seed that falls amongst the rocks, these are the people who, well, I like this. I hear the Word. I like this. I want to get my life together. But I'd really rather just do all this. Like, for example, I was watching a video on YouTube last night about a woman who she does a thing called mukbang, which, quite frankly, I couldn't get into. It's what it is that she talks to the camera while she's eating food on camera. And she's constantly talking about how I want to get healthy. I want to become healthy. I want to become healthy. But what happens, and I believe that she's sincere. She showed vegan foods and things like that in her house and all that. So I believe that she's sincere about being healthy, about losing weight and all that. But she keeps doing it, or she'll stress eat, go to Taco Bell and stress eat a lot. And things like, so basically what happens is, she likes the idea of becoming healthy. She likes the idea of losing weight and all that, but she doesn't stick with it. And this is This is an analogy for the word not taking root. Those of us, we want to live an ordered life. We want to live an ordered life, say in our magical practice, in our spiritual practice. We want to get with it. But for some reason or other, we choose to go with the status quo of our lives rather than forcing ourselves to get into order. Forcing ourselves to get into order and do the damn work, which is how I distinguish occultism from a culture. Now, Naomi says, I think you have to live the chaos to know or understand the order. I may be a bit slower with reading comments today because I'm further back from the camera, and so my glasses aren't picking up as well. And you know what, Naomi? I think you're exactly right. You have to live at least through some chaos to understand order. It's just like, how do you know good without bad? How do you know good art without experiencing crappy art? Chaos and order, they're two sides of that coin. To know one is to know the other. How can you appreciate having something if you haven't lived through having nothing? How can you appreciate love if you don't know what it means not to have it? And that's actually something I'm going to talk about next week. I think you're exactly right and spot on. Thank you very much. So the seeds on the rock, these would be the people that they want to get their life together, but they're just not able to commit with their actions. They commit with their words, they commit with maybe in their heads intellectually, but not with their actions. Part of me wonders if armchair occultists could be included inside of this group. Then we have the ones that fall amongst the thorns. For a long, long time, I thought of myself as being in this group. Oh. Sorry. Clint Westwood says, how do you know good liturgy unless you see a boomer mass? Clint. Okay. Touche. You got me. Clint, I actually have video of me saying a boomer mass. I haven't uploaded it yet, but... Okay, my friend's church that I have told you all about, they used Novus Ordo 3.0. You know, it's their church, their liturgy, their rules. And I was asked to say the last mass there. But the music was straight out the 80s and 90s. I mean, it was very cultural, like you're stepping into 1986 and singing your average Novus Ordo from back then. Even if they're saying, and with your spirit as the response. So yeah, dude, I totally get where you're coming from because I've been there. Okay, but the word that falls amongst the thorns. Wow, you people are on fire today, I'll tell you. The word that falls amongst the thorns. For years I thought of myself as being in this category. Because these are people that, they hear the word. They really want to do it. They really want to do it. They want to commit their brains to this. They want to commit their bodies to this and their hearts and every part of their being. But it's really hard. I'm going to use the analogy of daily magical practice. It's really hard to put regular time into your practice when say you have children to take care of, or it's really hard to put into your practice when say you have a job that gives you random shifts. And it's like say a lot of frontline jobs. There's no regular schedule. It's totally random. How are you able to commit to a regular practice when you don't have a regular schedule? Or suppose you have other things going on that just completely and totally keep you away from it. Not really through any fault of your own. The necessities and cares and concerns of the world, they distract you. And so you're not able to develop the word. You're not able to develop your practice. And I want you to notice I'm talking about magical practice because magical practice, in the sense of theurgy, which is God working, magical practice in the sense of theurgy, it is the culmination of the word of our relationship with the word. It's that culmination of our relationship with God, and that culmination of the word inside of ourselves and inside of our hearts. That it does show in our thought, in our word, in our deed, and in our omission. That's why I'm using the parallel, because it very much applies to what we do every day. So falling amongst the thorns, you don't bring the fruit to maturity because you're not sticking with it, usually largely through no fault of your own. And then the good soil. Those are the people to whom the word brings forth the fruit. You have prepared yourself to receive the word. You have received the word. You have built up the word inside yourself. And if my terminology sounds a little bit new age right now, that's because I can't really think of a better way to describe what's being said here. The word in our hearts. And magical practice, as I said, is the building up of the word in our hearts. So a lot of that becomes how to convert ourselves, whether from being the pavement by the road or the surface of the rock or the area of the thorns, how to convert ourselves from that into good soil. That's a really major thing that we have to contend with. How do we do that? And this is what, to me, it leads to the idea of Christ the new Noah. And you find this idea of the Noah and the flood. This is actually in the Roman Breviary, the Old Testament reading for today. Okay, because the mass in the Breviary, the mass in the Breviary. Okay, they actually go hand in hand. All right, you have the Divine Office and the Holy Mass. They actually go hand in hand, and the day's liturgy actually consists of both of them. The liturgy for any given day. And so Genesis, if I recall 6, where we first hear of Noah, this is the Old Testament reading for today in the Breviary. And Christ the new Noah. So when we talk about Christ the new Adam last week, Christ the new Noah this week, or Christ the new Abraham next week, it's not so much as Christ as this person, so much as Christ's involvement in what happened, the events happening around this person. And in the case of Christ the new Noah, people had lost their way. They had lost their way. They'd lost grasp of the ordering principle of the universe so bad, all sense of order so bad, that God basically called exterminatus. We're going to wipe the slate clean and start over anew. Noah, your job. Build the big boat, get the animals so they can perpetuate the species, and get your family into this boat too. And they laughed at him. People laughed at him. They saw him building the boat. They laughed at him. Well, when the rain started, who's laughing now? So that's a thing right there. What does it take for us to make yourselves into the good soil that receives the word, it bears the fruit of the word, if we are effectively the rock or the road or the thorns? The idea of the flood comes in. The idea of the flood wiped away life from the world. I'm guessing the aquatic life still lived. The flood wiped away life. Now, from an archaeological viewpoint, in higher critical scholarship, the flood was most likely a major water event that happened in the Middle East, and it was just recorded in oral traditions until it was finally written down as the flood narrative. There are stories of floods, like in the Americas, you have the story of Wields, for the first woman. The story of the woman Takash saw people were evil, so he destroyed the world by the flood. Wambagleshka, the spotted eagle, he saw Wields, first woman, brought her up to Harney Peak in the Paasapas, the Black Hills. And humans and animals were closer in this time, and so they were able to mate. And so modern human beings, aka the Lakota Oyate, they were descendants of Wambagleshka and Wields as a result of the flood. So you have a flood narrative in the Americas. Amongst the ancient Greeks, there's Deucalion and Pyrrha, whom Zeus was going to flood the world. Deucalion and Pyrrha, they built an ark. It was very close to the Noah story. They built an ark, and they outlasted the flood, and they repopulated the world. And so, whether there was a worldwide flood, and this could be as far back, maybe even a racial memory coming from the Younger Dryas, when the ice melted, and then it froze again during the Younger Dryas, and then the ice melted again. It could be a memory from that. It could be individual local events that people thought was worldwide because they were so big. But the motive of the flood, wiping the slate clean, and people coming back, and people being repopulated, that's a common theme throughout the world. So, where do we go from this? What do we learn from this? That as the world was reordered by the flood, so our lives must be reordered if we are to culminate and become the good soil in which the ordering principle of the universe, Christ the Logos, may bear forth fruit in our hearts. If our practice is to bear forth fruit in our hearts, if we're to be consistent in our practice, if we're to be consistent in our devotion, consistent in the exercise of our faith, or as a reformer put emphasis on being faithful. And that can mean some very good things for us. That can mean some very bad things for us. It can mean getting out of toxic relationships. It can mean overcoming bad habits, finding out what our habits are. It can mean learning to deal with addiction. Now, I'm not going to get into the debate whether addiction is disease or addiction is aberration. I personally believe that it's a disease. But it is something that has to be overcome. Right? Even if it's not your fault that it happened to you, it is your responsibility to overcome it. Each of us as individuals has a responsibility to reorder our lives. Now, if you have concerns because you're raising children, if you can't hit with your devotions, then that's different. Your children have to come first. But you have to order your material life in order to order your spiritual life. The flesh is not the enemy of the spirit. The flesh is the vehicle of the spirit. And the symbolism of water, I think, is very apt here. First off, water gives life to soil. It gives life to the seeds that are in the soil. Second, water. When water goes over rock, water grinds down rock. Roads at the time were made of rock. So water grinds rock down into sand or soil. So water can make the rock fertile. So the seeds that are on the rocks can bear fruit as the rocks are ground down into soil. All dirt is simply ground down rock. Okay, as far as thorns, water can actually drown out and overwater those thorns and push them out of the way. And so when the flood is past, soil, what you have left is soil in which that word can be planted. This is Christ the new Noah and the Sunday of Word alone. And what gets us through this process, because you have to go through this process. In mystical theology, the process is called the purgative life, where you're purging the bad out of your life. Toxic relationships, drop the dead weight. If you have an employment situation that is toxic, an abusive boss or something like that, work to find a new job and let it go. Or even learn to go out on your own. Bide your time if you have to. Do what you have to do. But get your life in order. If you are in a relationship with a significant other, now this is where the moral guardians would really get on me about this. But the fact is, human interaction is a lot more complex than what most rigorous type moralists would have you believe. If you are in a relationship that is toxic, you have a toxic significant other, an abusive relationship, the best thing you could do is find a way out of it. That is potentially dangerous. That is potentially dangerous. It could be life-threatening. I get that. But it's more life-threatening, and I'm not just talking spiritual, I'm talking physically too. It's more life-threatening to stay in it. So to the best of your ability, find a way out of it. Find a way to get the toxicity out of your life. Everything that limits you, get it out of your life to the best of your ability. If you have to live with it, you have to live with it. Saint Rita of Cascia, she lived in an abusive relationship for years. So, this isn't just your cross to bear, offer up your suffering. This is offer up your suffering during the process of learning and managing to overcome your suffering and get it out of your life. You have to work both angles. Do you have any particular biases? Do you have any prejudices? Do you have any proclivities? Any obsessions? You have to work to manage those too. You have to work to manage everything wrong with you internally as well as externally. Becoming the good soil in which the Word is planted. And remember, the Word is the ordering principle. The Word is that which orders our lives because it orders the universe and it gives order to the universe. It brings order out of the chaos of the universe or in our lives or in our interactions. And this is where, and this is actually kind of important because it's where the moral teaching comes in. Okay, the moral teaching. As I was telling Logos of Ophiel the other night, if you take the moral teaching, particularly morality as it concerns food, as it concerns sex, as it concerns various other things, if you put it in just a secular context, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. And you know what? This is where I think the new atheists are actually onto something. Most people think of their religion in terms of the moral teaching, and a lot of people in the pews, they take the moral teaching to a point of obsession, and it turns people off. But if you look at the moral teaching, again, food, sex, and so on, if you look at it in a spiritual context, in a context we'll call asceticism, it makes perfect sense. In fact, it becomes a necessity. Because the main root of it is self-control, ascesis. This is where the English word ascetic comes from. It's a Greek word that means training. Remember last week when in the epistle where St. Paul was talking about training like an athlete for running a race? He's talking about asceticism. And the moral teaching, as a form of asceticism, it makes sense. You're gaining self-control. This is the ordering principle of the Word, the rational principle of the Word, giving order to our lives as it manifests in our actions. How to treat your neighbor, how to treat yourself, how to behave towards God, how to develop self-control of your urges, how to overcome your prejudices or your biases, how to navigate potentially toxic interactions or relationships. All of this is part of asceticism. Working on your life physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. And this is the Word taking root in your heart. This is what it is. It's not some big conversion experience where you fall on your knees, you say the sinner's prayer, and all of a sudden you're brand new. In fact, how many of you are familiar with chick tracts? You know the Bible tracts that look like miniature comic books? That's the line of thinking that those tracts come from. That all you got to do is fall on your knees, ask God for forgiveness, say the sinner's prayer, and you're brand new. That's the Word entering your heart according to the world of Jack Chick. In fact, there was one that was so heinous that he got rid of it. I don't want to go into details there. Where this man, he's down and out, he does horrific things to his daughter. His wife lets it happen because he's not bothering her. He does horrific things. But just because he accepted Jesus into his heart and he was changed, he was forgiven and got away scot-free. That is horrible. And that is not how the Word manifests in your heart. It is not a once saved, always saved kind of deal. It is not that. It is, the Word is out there. The Word is out there in the universe. As the end for Pentecost tells us, Spiritus Domini replevet orbem terrarum. The Spirit of the Lord filleth the entire earth. And Cole says, a hilarious film was made about his Dark Dungeons comic. Yes, actually, I pre-ordered that and I downloaded it on day one. There are actually a few others. I think it was Bullion Union also made another one, which is more word for word by the tract. Love it. It's my favorite one of all time. The Last Generation is my second favorite. Someday we may do a chick tract read-along. That can be fun. Kathy says, once saved, always saved is what most denominations teach. Well, that's what most of your radical denominations teach. It's not what most Christians teach. Catholics do not teach once saved, always saved. Orthodox do not teach once saved, always saved. Lutherans do not teach once saved, always saved. Anglicans do not teach once saved, always saved. And once you get that, you have the vast majority of the world's Christians. What's left that teaches once saved, always saved, they're like a small but loud minority in comparison. Okay, So I was getting off track there. Where we go with this, the word implanting in the hearts, the word is available to us. Okay, the word is available. The word always seeks to come into our hearts. The word always seeks to. We have to let it in. But that's the beginning of the process. Now I want you to know, I'm talking about how this works outside the sacraments. The church teaches God is able to give sanctifying grace outside of the sacraments. And I'm not talking salvation here. I'm not talking salvation that requires the sacrament of baptism, except through baptism of blood and baptism of desire. But that word, which always seeks to come into our hearts, which we can develop, this is what develops us as spiritual practitioners. Now, the pathway to the word, it's open in baptism. Okay, I'm trying to figure out exactly how to say this, but for us as baptized Christians, the word is implanted into our hearts. We cannot drive out the indelible character, i.e. the mark that can never be gotten rid of, that's imprinted on our soul from baptism. We can't drive that out. But we can drive out the influence of the word. We can mitigate it by our own free will, because free will is a thing. This is where the rock and the thorns and the road come in. But to develop it, we first wipe away the things that hold us back in our lives. We become, rather than the rock, the road, or the thorns, we become the good soil. That flood, that deluge, that wipes away all the bad things, that washes us clean, which is a prefigurement of baptism. But we have to do the work of making our lives the good soil. Just because you're given sanctifying grace in baptism doesn't mean you're given the fullness of sanctifying grace. You have to develop it. By developing the word, you get the fullness of sanctifying grace. I've talked about this before as the holy pregnancy. Develop the grace in your heart. And as you develop it, and this is whether through the rosary, through your daily spiritual practice, through the guardian angel exercise, as you develop it, through putting the moral teaching into practice with a view towards the spiritual end of it. Because this is what's called teleological, goal-oriented morality. You're working towards the goal. You're not doing it just because God said so. And in fact, the problem of doing it because God said so is that there are fringe theologians, and I'm using the word fringe because that's what they are. They're outside the mainstream. They're like in fundamentalist camp that say things like the command in Numbers for the Israelites to go and kill all the people in Palestine, to kill the Canaanites, basically. That command, it is horrific. It is wrong under normal circumstances. But if God commands you to do it, then it is automatically right, even if it's wrong every other time. That is a total doublethink. That's a total twist. God's law is consistent. He doesn't say, well, in this case, I'm going to make an exception. You can go and kill all these people. He doesn't say that. His law is consistent. Okay, Cole asks, which guardian angel exercise? Okay, in this case, we could talk... Okay, I'm using that as a general term. And Kathy, it is not in the prayer book I wrote. Okay, by guardian angel exercise, in my head, I was thinking the Abramelin exercise, which involves prayer and fasting and abstinence in order to connect with one's guardian angel. But one can also talk about saying the guardian angel prayer every day, and then taking a few minutes afterwards to just try to listen for your guardian angel. Just try to listen, see if there are any impressions, any feelings, even any sounds or sights that you see. Just spend time with that every day to help connect to them. There are other exercises, of course, but these are the main two that I think about when I talk about that. But morality is ascesis. Morality is giving order to one's life. Morality with the spiritual end in sight, rather than just looking at physical ends and God commands it, I'm afraid of going to hell. That helps to develop the word in your life. And in fact, actively striving to network and to make connections with other people who are of like mind, who are striving to develop the word inside themselves, and striving to get that order in their life, and striving to work on their spirituality. that also can be an important factor, because it helps to keep you from going off into fights of fantasy and la la land. It also helps to keep you centered. It helps to keep you discerning what's real experience versus what's going on in your head, and it also helps to keep you on track with your practice, because you're surrounded by your peers who are on the same road. And all of this, for this long ramble I've given, this long boring ramble I've given, all of this can be encapsulated in the theological virtue of hope. Because it is by the hope of getting my life ordered that I work to wash all the toxic and negative things out of my life. It is by the hope that I will advance in my spirituality and in both in my progress in theosis and in my progress and ability to manifest on the physical plane. It is my hope that leads me to order my life by the moral teaching, that leads me to develop the self-control, that keeps me away from the get-rich-quick schemes that are out there, or the get-powerful-quick schemes that are out there. It is that hope that I will get this together. And then, it is a hope derived from having manifested, the hope derived from having made progress and seeing the progress. That hope of that I will someday attain the beatific vision and all that entails. That hope which keeps me driving further. It is that hope that gets me through the purgative life, where I flood out the bad. That hope that gets me into the illuminative life, where I replace the bad with the good. And that is the hope of the unitive life, where I continue in the good and continue to develop and to grow and to increase and to expand. Now, Cole says, like Crowley and drugs? Exactly like Crowley and drugs, yes. In fact, that starts an entire conversation I'm not even really sure how to get into. It may take us a few hours, so I'm not going to. About separating Crowley the man from THAVMA the teaching. I'll simply leave that at Jesus' words that a tree is known by its fruits, and let everybody go where they want to with it from there. But that's pretty much all I have to say today. I feel that if I go any further, I'll probably start talking in circles. So, just to recap, the Word is that which orders our lives. The Word, which is Christ, which gives order to our life and gives us that ladder of ascent by which we may ascend to the heights of the divine. The Word is what orders our lives in terms of our interactions with our fellow man, in terms of our interaction with ourself, in terms of our interaction with the angels, the saints, the spirits, and the universe. Order, which gives us growth and increase if we so much as persevere in it. The flood, Christ the new Noah, the theme of the flood, which wipes out all that which is bad, that we may replace it with that which is good and become the fertile soil in which the Word is planted and bears fruit. And the virtue of hope, which enables us to continue onward, even in the face of despair, even in the face of opposition, even in the face of negativity, which we will vanquish, we will overcome, and we will conquer. Because you, as a magician, are not a doormat. You are not a doormat. You are not a mouse. You are not a cuck. You are a warrior. You are a soldier. You are a general. You are a conqueror. A wielder of the sword of the Spirit to that which opposes.